It's one, it's a true honor to have such wonderful speakers. And I think the message was loud and clear. I love the thought of Israel as a bridge between Europe and North America, the United States particularly. I think that would be amazing, and we should work hard to make that happen. So many spoke about one tradition we have here, and I want to speak about another tradition, and the other one is saving the best for last. So those of you who are here are about to get a real treat. Anyone who's ever heard me speak before, and of course, having a startup of myself, it's now a surprise that I think that the real engine that drives innovation and the real engine that drives the market is startups. And startups are an amazing thing, a very difficult challenge if you ever undertake it yourself, but it is quite the experience that I would recommend to any of you who have the heart and the gut for it. But startups need one thing to survive, and that is capital. And capital comes in different forms. One of the forms that it comes in is from VCs. And in the world of VCs, I have my personal views of how VCs differ from one another, let's put it this way, but there's one VC that I genuinely respect and love, and I think that all VCs should be modeled after, in the sense that they're true believers in innovation, true believers in supporting their startups and picking the best teams, and that is YL Ventures. And I would like to invite on stage now, what we're going to do here now, we're going to have three promising startups that are going to be presenting in front of a panel of CISOs, experts, industry experts, VCs. They're going to have an opportunity to showcase what they've done, and the person who's going to moderate this for us is Okafor, the partner and head of the Israeli office of YL Ventures. Ofer, the stage is yours, my friend.
Right, thank you. Thank you very much, Matan, for the great introduction. I feel that I can't say anything else about YL Ventures, so I'll just get straight to the panel. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Cyberstorm. Cyberstorm is CyberWeek's official startup panel, powered by YL Ventures. This is the third year that we're hosting the startup event here in CyberWeek. CyberWeek is a great opportunity to combine between cybersecurity Israeli innovators and customers, partners, investors that come from the US and from other places around the globe. So this is a very exciting week also for us, for YL Ventures, venture capital firm that invest in Israeli startups, specifically in cybersecurity. And one thing that I would add about us is that we get excited from Israeli cybersecurity so much that yesterday we actually published a map, an interactive map online that represents all Israeli startups. So we have around 200 Israeli cybersecurity startups broken down into categories, stages, and so on. So I invite all of you to take a look at cybermap.co. This is a great work from all of our internal research team. Please take a look. In the next hour or so, we're going to meet three super interesting startups. All of them have the same, they have some commonalities. All of them were founded by super talented Israeli technologists with great cybersecurity background, but the three of them actually try to solve real cybersecurity problems in completely different ways and completely different technologies. So the three startups are Vulcan Cyber, who's dealing in the vulnerability remediation field, Silverfort in the secure authentication field, and PatternEx in the third-party risk assessment. So we're going to hear about their solutions, about how they see the market, and of course, this discussion is not just about the startups themselves, but also hear about the market, hear about what some of the world's industry leaders have to say. And this is what Cyberstorm is all about. It's about brainstorming, it's about discussion, it's about bringing together Israeli entrepreneurs and their markets. So we have a great list of industry experts. Dr. Hugh Thompson, the Chief Technology Officer of Symantec, Tim Mather, the Chief Security Strategist of PatternEx, Andy Ellis, Chief Security Officer of Akamai, Eric McAlpine, founder and managing partner of Vulcan Cyber, and Bruce Taragin, managing director of Blumberg Capital. So we're going to have 3 sessions. In each session, each entrepreneur will present their startup. Then we'll have a discussion about the presentation, about some specific technical details that the panelists will have about the startup. And then we're going to zoom out and have a broader discussion in which the entrepreneurs will be able to ask questions to the panelists about some of their burning questions and challenges, and we'll have a broader discussion about each one of the markets that I just described. So I'm very excited towards this session. I'm sure that I'm going to learn a lot, and obviously the entrepreneurs and the audience. So let's get started. The first startup that I would like to call up on the stage is Vulcan Cyber, and I bring Yaniv Bardayan, co-founder and CEO of Vulcan Cyber, and a panelist, Dr. Hugh Thompson from Symantec and Tim Mather from PatternEx.
So everyone can hear me, it's good. In a minute, everyone could see the slides and the pyrotechnics, which is also good. My name is Yaniv Bardayan. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Vulcan Cyber. I came here to give you a short brief about what we do, and I have an interesting conversation with you and Tim that are right next to me. By 2020, still, 99% of attacks are going to exploit known vulnerabilities, and out of these, most of them will be known more than a year. Now for me, someone who came in from the incident response space before my job now, and more than that, from an EDR company, this statistics is shocking. After chasing the nation-state actors, and after seeing the more severe attacks in the world, I actually found out when founding this company that the majority of the problem lays in the things that we already know, rather than the things that we don't know. Now, when we started meeting more and more companies and talking with more and more enterprises, we understood that it doesn't matter if you are a large tier 1 American bank or a super innovative and agile technology company, you still manage vulnerabilities in the same traditional 20-year-old way. And the fact is, as such, you have scanners that helps you detect vulnerabilities in your infrastructure. It could be in your OS, in the applications that are running on top of it, and in the code that compiles them, either the ones that you write or the one that you lend from open source projects. Each scanner provides the same output, a report, very long report, packed with tens of thousands of vulnerabilities. All of them are prioritized based on their technical severity, rather than their business context or their threat context. One of the things that happens then is that a team manually takes these reports and analyzes them. Analyze them by asking questions like, is there an exploit in the wild? Is there or are there active campaigns that are utilizing this vulnerability now? And if so, which type of campaigns? Is it a malware, a DDoS, a crypto miner? Each one has a different impact on different parts of their network. And once they're already formulated this remediation plan, understood which vulnerabilities are more critical than the others, again, manually understood that, they have to start working with other teams at the IT side, the DevOps side, and the R&D side to actually drive remediation. Now this methodology is very good for the old world of IT. The world where IT is set, is iron and hardware, is that when you have to put on a server, you need to connect 2 cables and also install a software, and not in the new world, where IT environments are more flexible, are virtual, are on the cloud, and are managed automatically. What we learned is that because of this process, many of the benefits that R&D teams, IT teams, DevOps teams enjoy are lacking in the security world. And the 4 main challenges are that first, it's practically impossible to get visibility on the exposure level of your network. It's almost unbelievable how much you don't know on how many vulnerabilities you have in different parts of your infrastructure. Secondly, the workload is enormous. So much manual tasks that could be automated. Third, Even finding the right solution is a hustle. Should I patch? Should I update a minor or a major? Should I change a configuration or update a signature? All of these are my options to remediate one vulnerability, but which one is best and which one is suitable for this time of the year, of the company, of the production environment, and so on. And last but not least, so many stakeholders to please. If it's the business side, the security side, the IT side, or the executives. Orchestrating this entire process to make sense and to do it in high scale was, hopefully until today, an impossible mission. And this is exactly what we're coming to solve. Vulcan Cyber was founded in order to close the vulnerability remediation gap, to allow organizations to solve this problem in high scale and high speed and be able to narrow down their attack surface to almost nothing. The way that we do that is by integrating every asset and every tool that you have that detects vulnerabilities, and also from the other side, every tool that you have that helps you manage your infrastructures better. The concept, we take all the data into one place and we create this visual of the network. The option for you to see where your exposures are and how they impact your production environment, your network. Second step is to enrich this data with threat intelligence. Understand if these vulnerabilities are in use or not, what type of campaigns are running. Help you prioritize these vulnerabilities based on their criticality and risk. Then we also provide you with the solutions. We collect and create the largest database of vulnerabilities attached to solutions. Doesn't matter what the solution is. It could be a patch, it could be a configuration change, it could be a signature. We don't mind. We only want to give you the indication on what's going to help you solve the problem in the most effective way. And last but not least, if you want to automate it, either using your CI/CD pipeline or embedding your change management processes, do it. The orchestration piece of the platform allows you to connect to all the tools on the right side and basically choose how to orchestrate and operate them in an automated fashion with a bit of sanity checks by the different teams as you'll choose. Today, the product is in beta version, and we are focusing mainly on the server world and in production environments. But as we grow, and we grow quite fast, even faster than I expected, we start to broaden the platform to handle also the more traditional parts, desktops, hardware, middleware, and so on. Hopefully, in one day, we'll be able to touch everything and solve everything. Thank you very much. Ooh, cozy.
So I applaud the vision. It's hard to overstate the magnitude of the problem in an enterprise. I mean, this is truly painful. Just the scope of the work that needs to be done and the extent of the damage that can be done when it doesn't go right, which is actually quite often. We need only to look at Equifax and see what a disaster that was off of that. Here's a well-known critical vulnerability that was announced. Equifax didn't even get around to it until about 60 days later. So I agree with that. What I'm wondering, though, is what you're talking about is taking an existing problem and reducing the magnitude of that by being able to patch faster off of that. Can you go even further? What you're talking, and to be specific, what you're talking about now is patching deployed assets. What I really want to be able to do is to patch assets that aren't even deployed yet, so that when they do get deployed, they're clean. What can you do about that, please?
So, Tim, I think what you're touching now is exactly the opportunity that led us to understand that this world can change. Because if before, the only thing that I could do is to patch things that are alive, today, in the world of DevOps, containers, and applications that allow me to run things in a more automated fashion and a flexible fashion, I also have the ability to do things as early as possible. And actually, doing things in the early stage are also way more cost effective. Rebuilding a Docker, putting it up, and see if the rebuild Docker with the updated version works well, and then to deploy it on production is very easy, even easier than patching a system. And this is exactly the places where we're going to get into, driving changes through the CI/CD pipeline of the production environments, helping the organizations already utilize the tools that their R&D teams build in order to drive regular changes. And the real question is, should a security change be different than a business-oriented change? Our opinion, by the way, is no. Security is a business-needed feature, just like any other feature. And we are trying to drive it forward using the already set, already implemented, enterprise tools that helps other teams accept security today, hopefully not in the future, drives these changes as well.
You know, first, let me just say congratulations.
Thank you.
There's not a huge amount of entrepreneurs that can very clearly articulate the vision, turn it into a set of visuals that really a large group can digest. So I think you did a really, really great job of laying that out. And, you know, I guess the first question I have for you is you're depending on a set of systems that some companies have and some companies don't. So I think about classic patch management, scanning, vulnerability scanning tools, also tools that are scanning things like development environments and looking at deployed instances in AWS, for example. What maturity level of a company are you trying to sell into? Like, what is your ideal customer? Are they somebody that's already incredibly mature and has many of these tools already deployed? Or are you looking for a company that really doesn't have a mature vulnerability management process yet, but you're trying to bring it in?
Is there any such thing as a company with a mature vulnerability?
I don't know. We're going to find out.
So I think this question has two answers. One is from the view of a CEO of a startup, and how good is that the options are sometimes narrow because it helps us to focus. And focus is probably the most important thing for success when you are a small company fighting big sharks. Here, I want to say this is an opportunity for us. This is exactly what helps us focus our efforts to the industries that we can make sense the most. And yes, the maturity level should be higher than regular. Organizations that has several scanners, organizations that already run vulnerability management process as they go. Today, the path that we chose is to basically be zero friction in deployment, meaning we don't do anything except of using existing APIs. This means also the downside is that I cannot get into every organization. But as we build a business, as we grow in the future, one of the features that we might add are exactly these scanning features. So for the very beginning, at my first time, what I do and what we do is that we focus on the more mature enterprises, especially, by the way, from the tech side, the ones that are already DevOps oriented with a mature CI/CD pipeline, with the option and the acceptance of automation concepts in general. And then as we grow, the world is endless. We can start scanning, we can start patching, we can start doing these things, and then provide the things that are lacking to the less mature enterprises as part of the whole platform.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of sectors that I think, as you mentioned, high tech, for example, which are obvious customers. There's a couple of large sectors which strike me as not being obvious customers here. Retail, for one, exactly. I can't really see them doing this, and there's a couple of other ones. You know, financial services would be interesting, would like to be, but you know, because of regulatory factors, they're not exactly very nimble sometimes, even though this is certainly something that would impact them. But a question for you then, please. There's another challenge that I think that you face, and I'd be curious to know how you deal with that. There's a couple of very large national vulnerability databases. Of course, the United States maintains one. NIST has maintained that for years. The Chinese also have one now, and there's some argument over whether the Chinese database is actually more comprehensive and updated more frequently than the American ones. So we'll leave aside all the trade stuff going on, blah, blah, blah. But there's a whole bunch of other sources there, and those both are API accessible, known formats, readily ingestible from your perspective. But you have a whole bunch of other sources that I would think you probably want to draw in that are going to be different formats. They may even, many of them may even be unstructured. And so how would you ingest that on a scalable basis so that you can enrich that data that you have you've got the vulnerability data on the one hand, from the on-customer sensors, whether it's on-premise, in the cloud, whatever the case might be, but then you've got your, shall we say, your threat intel off of that. And so how would you scalably ingest all of that data so you can turn that around very quickly for your customers?
I think this is the question for us, because eventually doing integrations is easy. You don't need not investors and not a startup company. You need to start a company to try and break these hard questions, hard problems, and try to bring into the market something that has also a very large technological benefit. When we look at these databases, the structured and the unstructured, one of the things that you try to do is to identify these patterns, these things that we can adjust and take out of the text on the one hand, but out of the databases from the other, fairly, let's say, fairly easy in some ways, and in other ways, in other use cases, a bit in a harder way, and I'm going to explain why, and basically save a lot of time that is now being basically wasted by analyst teams at the enterprise side doing that themselves. The practices are that we have three ways. One, using the human mind. The human mind is probably the best tool that we have in hand today, especially as a small startup. We're trying to hire the smartest people, and these smart people can do a lot only by understanding things that other people don't understand, out of their experience rather than also their wit or brightness. Secondly, is to try to employ automation, not machine learning and not AI, not yet. Just understand these patterns, try to find them throughout vast majorities of text, vast majorities of databases, and structure them from scratch, really building the database from scratch in a way that then will be accessible and easy to use both by the enterprise but also by anyone. One of the things that we think about is once we already have this database, why not share it? And last but not least, really go for the hardcore technology. Really look at the places where the tools that machine learning and artificial intelligence provide us in order to conquer a specific use case. One example for this use case is this patch good or not? What is good? Good is no downtime, good is solving the problem, good is zero dependencies. All of these things are things that we can understand from the user experience that these updates or patches provide us. And these are parts of the text analytics efforts that we are trying to provide and to produce in-house in order to eventually show the users, should you install or shouldn't you? Should you choose this solution or should you choose the alternative? And this is a hardcore task that we run also with from experts in the academy up to super talented cyber researchers that we put together. And this diversity of minds is basically the core for this innovation, the different perspective on the same problem.
So I'm glad that you mentioned dependencies there, because there are a lot of times when patches are pushed out and they don't actually stick. And many times it's because of the dependencies. And we tend to focus on, was the patch pushed? And the real metric that we should be measuring is, did the patch stick? And we don't have a good way to do that right now. So it gives you a false sense of security that, yeah, hey, I pushed it out there to 6,000, 8,000 systems, whatever the number is, and you're thinking life's great, and well, it failed on 435 systems, and you're still vulnerable.
True. I think that this specific use case is exactly shows how much we neglected the vulnerability management space so far as an industry. Because building a repository of dependencies is something that is not hard, but it's not just no one did it before. So all of these small things that allows us to provide intelligence to the organizations and allows us to give the perspective on what should you do and what is the impact, like dependencies, for example, but also if the vulnerability is 1 year old, which of the 20 versions that are out there now that you can patch or use, you should use. Maybe some of them are more vulnerable than others. These kind of questions are the things that we are actually trying to analyze in order to drive things forward. Now, because we are quite tight of time, and I would also like to ask you a couple of questions.
Sure, please.
Maybe Tim, from your perspective as now the chief security strategist of the company that you work at, moving target defense, this new methodology of detection and response.
Yeah.
Is it a risk to us as a company or to the vulnerability management world in general?
So let's break that down then. So what I think we're really talking about here is less at the operating system level. All of the operating systems have had ASLR for years. What we're really talking about here then is at the host level. And so this is conceivably an option to what you're providing off of that, where I don't need to patch because frankly I just take the system down, patch online, and stand it back up. There's only one company that I'm aware of that is effectively doing host-based moving target defense, and that's it. And that's Netflix, because they're entirely based on AWS, and they push new code 2 to 3 times a day. And so they're constantly doing that. I compromised 200 of your systems, that's okay. Go ahead, hackers, you got 4 hours to utilize that. So in the short term, I think the answer is no. Could it be in the long term? Potentially, but quite honestly, there's so much low-hanging fruit here that you can solve. Realistically, I think not. I mean, again, it's hard to underestimate how serious a problem this is. It's not sexy, but it takes so much resources, and it's so important to do, and ops teams would love to just ignore it, and you ignore it at the enterprise's expense.
It's the donkey work, no doubt. So it's actually interesting that you've mentioned Netflix, because one of the questions that we ask ourselves, and we're also asked by our investors, is, and we talked about the maturity level, is which type of organizations are mature enough? And I think that as a startup that tries to innovate, you always get stuck in these barriers.
Yep.
How can you get in to a large enterprise that can, for the one hand, provides you with the right feedback to build your product correctly, but also for you as a company, help you grow and show the value and gain credibility in order to grow your business. And Hugh, just from your perspective, I mean, you see so many different companies and so many different enterprises. And we talked about our go-to-market before we sat here, of course. What do you think? Who are the right and potential prospects that I should turn into? Which type of companies would be more acceptable to the concept that Vulcan are trying to present?
You know, it seems to me that, and you identified it yourself, you need a mature organization that already has a set of sensory capabilities and tools, vulnerability scanners, things that are working inside of DevOps to be very effective and show value quickly. But, you know, the fortunate thing is those mature enterprises are often some of the most open companies to try new things, right? But one of the things that I think is going to be quite challenging in talking to those companies, and I'm thinking about companies in financial services, for example, that tend to be very mature in this area, companies like technology companies that you're already working with, is their biggest want and need is for simplicity. How do they make this simple? So my piece of parting guidance as the time ends is focus on visualization. How can you take all this data and make it digestible so that the CISO feels like you've simplified his world in this space?
Thank you. Good. It was a pleasure.
Right. Thank you very much. That's all the time we had for the discussion. Vulcan Cyber, Hugh Thompson, and Team Mather. All right. Thank you. All right, moving on to our second startup, Silverfort. I'd like to bring on stage Ed Kovetz, co-founder and CEO, and two amazing panelists, Andy Ellis from Akamai and Eric McAlpine from Untitled Cyber.
Hi, so I'm with the wrong presentation, but let me start and present myself anyway. So it's great to be here. My name is Ed Kovetz. I'm one of the founders and the CEO of Silverfort. And let me jump right to the bottom line of what it is that we do at Silverfort. So Silverfort provides an authentication solution for enterprises. And the unique thing about it is that it can actually protect the authentication of any application, server, device, including even things that don't support strong authentication today at all, like IoT devices, proprietary systems, shared files and folders, industrial systems, and more, without actually installing anything on your endpoints and servers. So today, authentication is becoming a very complex issue for enterprises. There are many types of assets that are being accessed by corporate users. Of course, we have the infrastructure, servers, applications, and so on, but it's only getting more complex because today we also have cloud assets that are being accessed by our employees and also IoT and OT systems. And we need to protect access to all of these and make sure that only our users are accessing it. Unfortunately, many of these assets only support very basic password-based authentication. Some of them can be integrated with strong authentication, with multi-factor authentication products, but it involves very complex, very hard integration, like installing agents or implementing SDKs. And others don't support it at all. For example, how can you add multi-factor authentication to a medical device? or to an industrial systems, or to a shared folder that might be exposed to ransomware. Even the ones that do support multi-factor authentication support different authenticators. So you have one authenticator for your cloud assets, one for your IT systems, one for your consumers, one for your subcontractors. And because of this, we have many problems that organizations are facing. One, integrating existing authentication solution requires that you install or configure something on every individual asset. That's impossible in today's large, complex environments. Some of these assets don't support strong authentication at all, no matter what, because you can't really install an agent on them, like IoT devices or OT systems. In other cases, assets are just too dynamic, like in the cloud, being added and removed from the network all the time so that you can't really chase them and implement strong authentication on each of them. The IT often don't even know what servers are on the air right now. And then the last thing is, even if you successfully implement multi-factor authentication in the places where you can, you end up using several different siloed authentication solutions. So you have different user experience for each. You have different places where you need to manage policies, limited visibility, and of course, you don't really have an ability to do effective adaptive authentication that is based on the user behavior. Because how much can you say about a user behavior by looking only at authentications to an individual asset? But what if we could really analyze every authentication in the organization to in every asset, in the cloud, on-prem, in the IT environment, in the OT environment, without having to integrate with individual assets? Protect all of the authentication and apply adaptive authentication that really considers the behavior of the user across all of these assets and environments without integrating with individual assets and with one consistent user experience. This is exactly what we do at Silverfort. We have a way of protecting authentication of all of these different assets without integrating with them, without modifying them, and without deploying inline proxies. The way that we do it is by integrating with the identity providers, your Active Directory, your cloud identity provider, your Linux LDAP, and even in unmanaged environments, and configuring all of them to communicate with our platform so that we become the one unified place where you manage all of your authentication policies and where you get visibility into them. And then we can trigger step-up authentication for any suspicious user activity across all of the assets and environments with one user experience without any integration with individual assets and with the ability to consider user behavior across the board. So if the user is accessing different assets in different environments, you know that together this is a normal or an abnormal activity and you can trigger step-up authentication. And to make this even better, we integrate with third-party security products so that we can get alerts from your firewalls, from your endpoint protection products, from your SIEM, and we can actually use them for real-time step-up authentication. So if your firewall is saying that there's suspicious activity from this endpoint, we can make sure that this endpoint immediately needs step-up authentication, and we send this feedback back to the system that alerted and tell it, you know, out of all of these countless alerts, these are the ones where the user couldn't prove his identity. These are the ones that you want to look at. So we can actually achieve prevention without blocking legitimate users. So to summarize, with this unique technology, we can enable multi-factor authentication everywhere, abstract it, so even if you have different authenticators for different environments, you control it from one place, achieve adaptive authentication that looks at everything the user is doing everywhere and can step up spontaneously in the case of suspicious activity, consistent user experience, unified visibility, and all of this without installing anything on your endpoints and servers and without deploying inline gateways. So this product is already deployed in large enterprises across the world. We have strategic partnerships with some of the largest security vendors in the world. And if you want to hear more, we'd be happy to speak. So thank you very much for listening today.
Thank you very much, Ed. And let's have an interesting discussion.
So Head, let's start from the defender's point of view, right? And we're deploying lots of technologies to solve this access problem. Where do you fit in that ecosystem and in that stack? And to sort of borrow Hugh's question, who's the right buyer? Where do they need to be on that maturity model?
So, as you know, and I subbed some of it in the presentation, there are many solutions today that are around identity and access management, right? You have your identity providers that are usually separated between cloud, on-prem, and so on. You have multi-factor authentication products, you have security products. We sit in the place where we can really connect them. So we look at all of the identity providers, we look at alerts from all of the security products, and we can trigger any second factor authentication. So I didn't mention it, but the second factor doesn't necessarily need to be ours, right? We can let an organization choose whatever authenticator he likes to use, but instead of having 5 different multi-factor authentication products, managing them separately, letting the employees carry several tokens, you can choose one, implement it across all of the identity providers in a unified way, and leverage all of these existing security products to make the adaptive authentication even better. So we believe that we really allow you to make authentication from a siloed thing into something much more holistic.
My first question is, can I invest? It really sounds like a panacea for authentication when you think about your really big vision here. Why you? Why your team? Can you just give us a little bit of the backdrop there? And then, most importantly, why this approach? And
sure. So, the authentication market is a large one, right? Crowded one. And we believe that going to a large market, if you have something that can really disrupt it, something that, a large problem that still exists and you can really solve, that can be a huge opportunity. In this area, we believe that the barrier was the ability to analyze all of these different authentication protocols, right? And our founders team come from a background of cryptographic research. So all of us come from a small subunit inside Unit 8200, where we dealt with this kind of problem. All of us were, we were commanders there. I was a group leader there. And we managed to build a very strong team of researchers, cryptographic researchers, cybersecurity researchers, and build a very unique ability that we are currently the only company that has that can actually allow us to analyze all of these protocols and unify them in a way that other vendors couldn't before us. And I think that this is something that can really change the way authentication is being implemented today.
So I think when we look at that technology, it's very interesting, right? So you're sort of sitting on the back end. What's the user experience going to be like, for not the defender implementing, but for those end users? What are they going to see after a Silver Fort deployment? So whatever asset you are trying to access, one of the advantages of our approach is that you access it the same. You don't need to go to any dedicated portal or app in order to access the resource. So user experience is really seamless, right? Everything that you are doing, we see and analyze. And the advantage of doing it is the fact that there are so many authentications that users are doing and are not even aware of, right? From the moment you open your computer, everything you are accessing, your email, a shared folder, a web app, even if it's being done with single sign-on to Active Directory or some cloud identity provider, in the backend it creates authentications, right? Hundreds of authentications per day. When you look at authentication to an individual asset, you can't really tell much about it. But when you look at all of this, it's very easy to profile a user and know if it's him or someone else. Let me give you an example. Somebody is trying to access 100 different file shares at the same time. This might be a ransomware, right? The ability that we have to trigger step-up authentication and to see all of these activities lets us prevent these attacks. Only when we want to trigger this step-up authentication, the user will even notice anything, right? So we'll trigger step-up authentication through your favorite authenticator, right? You can use whatever authenticator you want. You get a notification to your phone, you click, you get a push notification, click yes, and you are in. But now you can do it even for a medical device, even for a legacy system, even for an asset in the cloud that was created only seconds ago and the IT have no idea that it even exists, right? So we really bring you the best user experience by letting you choose the best token and also by annoying you much less, right? The fact that we see so much authentication means that we don't need to
trigger step-up authentication every time. We have more data, so we can reduce the amount of step-up authentication.
Well, as the least technical person on any of these panels and as the money guy, my big question for you is this a billion-dollar idea? When we think about the ecosystem and where you fit in, we have multiple billion-dollar market cap identity companies. We have on-prem now shifting to cloud, biggest initiative at Oracle today. How do you fit in with that ecosystem? And is this disruptive? Is it additive? Is it market share taking? Or is it just a new way, a new paradigm? In which case I would then offer, maybe it's a $10 billion idea, but I'd love to get your thoughts.
So I do believe that this is something that is a multi-billion-dollar company simply because we go to a large existing market, and you know, some people are afraid to do that, right? But I believe that if you go to such a large market and you have a way to solve a huge existing problem, look at the authentication market, right? It exists for decades, and still, in almost every data breach, stolen passwords are leveraged, right? For me, this means that the problem is not solved, even though there are so many vendors. We are trying to solve something different than them. All of them are basically looking at what is the authentication method. Is it this biometric, that biometric, one-time password, push notifications? We try to solve a different problem. How do you take these great technologies and enable them for systems that are currently considered unprotectable, right? Once we do it, we can actually introduce a better way to deliver strong authentication anywhere, right? It doesn't really make sense to integrate with individual assets when you can put something like this, that, by the way, takes only a few hours to deploy in a large enterprise, and you immediately protect authentication to anything in it, including those assets that were unprotectable until now, and even the ones that are currently protectable, but with so many siloed solutions. So I do believe that this is something that will redefine this market and replace the way people are implementing authentication today, to answer your question.
In some ways, there's a parallel to Vulcan, which we just heard about, where everybody patches their first-class systems, and it's everything else they don't cover. Yep. And everybody puts great authentication and step-up auth on their flagship application and forgets about everything else.
Exactly, exactly. And also, we believe that in order to build such a large company, the way to do it is through partnerships. So this is why we invest so much in such an early stage in partnering with the largest vendors in the industry, and we have such partnerships that allow us to, go to market faster with a strong player and really fit in with the industry instead of going and, attacking the existing vendors in a way that I believe will allow us to build a huge company much faster, right?
We've got about 5 minutes left. Questions for us?
Yes, of course. So, you ask about, is it a billion-dollar company? So one of my questions to you is, what are your advice, for startups that want to get to this size?
Maybe I can give the board level advice and you do the technical.
Sure.
You want to do the technical first?
So I think at the technical level, and I think Yaniv put it really, really well, which is focus. Right? You get to $1 billion actually without focus. It's important later on to be able to split. But first you have to have a really solid core, then that's both technology and a customer base. That's your strength, and that you defend that against all comers. Right? And then you use that to move out further. One of the biggest challenges is the startups that say, I have $1 billion idea, which means I need to be in 20 markets. Right? No, you pick your market, you pick your technology, you execute, you make it something that users love. This is the dirty secret of security. When you look at in your neighborhood space, right? We have Duo, and users love Duo. It's just it's a simple interface, and they didn't do anything novel. But because users love it, the security teams are like, yes, I will deploy something, and finally you will thank me for a security product. So getting to the point that your users are thanking you is really critical for that huge adoption in the security space.
I'll start with a story, and then I'll get into the advice. In 2006, there was a very large multi-billion-dollar identity deal in the merger world. That was when Art sold his company to EMC. My role in that transaction was advising the cover bid, the stalking horse. And as a fourth-year associate at a big bank, Citigroup, I mean, this is a deal. This is kind of a career-making thing, right? And it got away from us. Little known fact about that company is it was founded in 1982. It took them 24 years, that journey. And so my advice to my founders and the boards that I sit on and the investments that I make is, let's not take 24 years. But at the speed of innovation today and the way that things are moving, there's really one piece of advice that I'd give every founder, which is business development before corporate development. So often, especially in this culture, people are asking about selling the company well before they've even achieved what I consider to be critical mass in terms of recurring revenue. You don't even have enough proof points yet to see if those customers are going to stay with you for the long haul. So focus on that ecosystem, that partnership that you're doing, and use advisors. You don't have to pay me. I don't have to be under contract, but really surround yourself with a good set of advisors that's going to help you achieve the highest access in the industry. Ultimately, when it does have, you're going to have to make that decision at some point. Do I take that Series B, C, or D term sheet? Do we go public? Or do I take that offer that's on the table, especially if you built a really solid partnership ecosystem, you'll end up in that enviable position. You have to ask yourself, was this the journey that I saw when I started out? And to Andy's point, it shouldn't be. You shouldn't be thinking about that. That's not the time to be thinking about that today as a Series A company. So really build that partner ecosystem out and do it with the help of others. Surround yourself with good advisors. And then sell software. That's how you sell software companies. You sell software.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And can you share with me some of your thoughts about the identity and access management market? What are the trends that you think that we should look at, and us or other companies in the area?
So what I really like about this is you fit in with one of the trends that's really critical, which is the death of the password. Right? We need to kill the password, and whether that's take it out back, stick a stake in it, whatever it requires. But the challenge is going to be, like for the web, that's easy. For all of my internal web apps, it's now a certificate and push-based auth. No password, that's great. But I've got a lot of systems that are in your sweet spot where it's a router that only accepts passwords, and maybe I can implement TACACS. Or it's some other legacy system. And so to be able to take and at least add a multi-factor on top of a password as part of that transition, I think that's going to be huge. I think you do need to aim yourself for the passwordless future, and that's why I like that it's not just about step-up authentication, it's also about anomaly detection on authentication and detecting when that's needed.
Absolutely, and I think that this is exactly what brought us to this approach, saying that you can't really eliminate passwords until you enable adaptive authentication everywhere, right? So thank you very much.
All right, and we're out of time. Thank you very much. Silverfort, Ed Kovac. Thank you, Andy from Akamai, and Eric from Momentum Cyber. Thanks. All right, and we're moving on to our third and last startup for today. I'm happy to bring up to the stage PatternEx. Matan Noel, CEO, and Demi Ben-Ari, VP R&D. And our two panelists will be Bruce Taragin from Blumberg Capital and Tim Eder again. Tim.
This? This? Okay. Check it in a second. Good afternoon, everybody. I just want to do a quick thing. I know it's late during the day, but I would love to break a bit the mood here and do a selfie before the actual talk. So everybody, like, do something and say cyber. I know it's a thing, yeah. Okay, hopefully everything here will work. Good afternoon. My name is Demi Ben-Ari. I'm the VP R&D and co-founder of PatternEx. And at PatternEx, we help large enterprises to measure the security posture of their suppliers. Target, T-Mobile, Lockheed Martin, everybody are talking about these companies in the matter of third-party breaches that were made. But we like to take an example, PNI Media, a small tech company that was breached and hurt all of these big retailers in the matter of financial loss, and also in the matter of breach of cybersecurity with their customer data. Financial services, payroll services, law firms, these are also suppliers that hold sensitive data of our customers. And not only that, one of our customers, a large bank, also told us about his flower delivery company. And we were like, what? Why is that important at all? And they said that basically they have the list of all of their high-ranking employees, all of their most valuable customers, with their names, addresses, phone numbers, and basically by that they have sensitive information of their customers. So any vendor can impose a risk, a cybersecurity risk, on our customers. How we do that and what we do at PatternEx. Basically, we look at a company in the hacker's point of view. We look at the IT and network, application layer, all of it is out-facing to the customers, and also on the most lucrative vertical, the employees of the company and their behavior. Current solutions are super manual. I think you all know the security questionnaires, 60 to 360 questions, talking about password complexity, security policies, background checks on employees, and it's super expensive and manual labor that our customers are doing with their suppliers. Everything is super outdated immediately, and also the biggest problem here is scale. An SMB, even in the United States, has around like 1,000 to 3,000 suppliers. You can't actually manage that manually. What do we do at PatternEx? With a click of a button, we give full transparency on all of the suppliers and the security gaps that our customers have with their supply chain. Doing everything 24/7, dynamic monitoring. If something changes in the attack surface of the organization, basically we can notify both sides, both our customers and the suppliers. And of course, everything is being done installation free. We don't install anything not on the side of our suppliers and not on the side of our customer. So, how is it done? Looking at a single hacker trying to expose some kind of vulnerability in the web server and to penetrate the organization. So multiply that, we mimic the behavior of 10,000 hackers, mapping the attack surface of the supplier, basically providing the full visibility on the security gap vulnerability analysis of our suppliers, combining that with internal policies, with smart questionnaires that are adapted and customized to our customer and his supplier, correlating everything in a big data mechanism, in a big data layer to provide personalized ratings and also actionable insights of actually how to improve their security posture. It's not only saying to the supplier, you're bad or good. It's providing means and measurements to actually improve his security posture. I won't go into depth here because we don't have much time, but basically we took the whole life cycle of onboarding and monitoring the vulnerabilities and the security gaps that we have with their suppliers and shortened the lifespan of onboarding a vendor from 6 months to 72 hours. If you're looking to validate this market and what's happening in the cybersecurity world here, basically a lot of analysts all around the world are saying that cybersecurity ratings will be as important as credit scoring, financial credit scoring. Our vision in PatternEx is to become the standard of cybersecurity ratings, but not only that. The important thing is we provide measurements to give transparency and to hold some kind of conversation between our customers and the suppliers and to improve the security posture of the small suppliers. And by that, actually improve the security posture of the whole industry. The company was founded 2 years ago by cybersecurity and big data experts. And I'm really proud to say that we've initiated sales this year, and we have more than 10,000 suppliers in our system. Thank you very much for hearing, and if you have any questions, we'll do that here in the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Demi. And now let's hear what our panelists have to say.
Yeah. So I like the fact that you have acknowledged that there's two significant problems here. One of them is the fact that obviously there are very high-profile cases where this problem has broken down and there have been breaches. And number two is that the survey approach that's currently being used is absolutely unscalable, and it's also rather pathetic because it's all subjective information. And you're talking about marrying objective information with that as well. So that said, there's been a couple of spectacular failures trying to address this problem as well. I'm thinking specifically about financial services and the BITS shared assessment from a few years ago. And Moody's tried this, and they weren't able to pull that off. So I think that's a challenge for you. And what's changed in your approach to technology that gives you confidence that you can win, where you can be successful where others have not?
Yep. So, great question. I mean, I think we saw a lot of, and you're talking about BITS, there was also the VSA, the Vendor Security Alliance. They tried to do like a combined questionnaire, but what we see more and more that, you know, you need one company to agree about something with the other company, and if you take 10 companies to agree about the same questionnaire, it really doesn't happen in the end of the day. In our mechanism, we actually have our own kind of questionnaire we build out for many other sources, but we're able to customize that through every single evaluator in a way that every supplier gets only the question that he's added. So he can answer about all the questions only once, and if there is a new one, he can answer about that as well. We also combine that with the hacker point of view, which brings a lot of information and a lot of trust between both sides and transparency.
Yeah, I like that, including the objective part of it as well, yeah.
Sure. I don't know if this is working. There we go. So just maybe a show of hands from the audience, how many of you are entrepreneurs and giving pitches and trying to raise money? So I've been at Blumberg Capital as an early stage investor for 20 years. I've probably looked at and heard about 30,000 pitches over the 20 years. And I have to say that was a fantastic presentation because in 5 minutes or less, I really got the essence, I think, of what it is you do. And it's really not easy. I really liked your slide that I personally would have put up front, but it was good that it was there at all. You know, we are the D&B of cybersecurity. Yeah. It just, honestly, for investors like us who hear so many presentations day after day, and we kind of all suffer from ADD, and you want to make sure you get that out right up front. And so now, like, okay, I've got it. I really understand where you position yourself and how you sit. So kudos to you on because it's really, it's not easy in an hour. It's even more challenging over just the course of a few minutes. So quite interesting. And I think if you look also statistically, I think in 2016, you know, you mentioned the hack.
P&I Media specifically, or
that led to that whole problem just from one supplier. But I think in 2016 there were 3 billion, you know, personal IDs that were hacked into. The Equifax hack, I think, was about 150 million.
146
million accounts that were compromised. So this is a big problem, and it's only getting worse. So again, I think the fact that you can apply artificial intelligence, machine learning, automation to this process that takes so incredibly long, and it's such a painful, tedious process. And by the way, I'm not an investor in the company, so, but I think it's really, really interesting and quite compelling. You know, I guess as an investor, you know, my first question is, show me the money. You know, how do you make money? How do you monetize in this business? And how's that looking? And what do you expect the evolution to look like in that regard?
So the current model that we're using is subscription-based, annual subscription-based, depending on the amount of suppliers you want to look at the system. And I mean, for suppliers today is totally free. Yeah. So the way it works, you know, companies can come in any size of margin of suppliers and can use from 50 to 100. We have even companies that have hundreds of thousands of companies, of suppliers they want to look at.
So, and maybe this is what you mean when you refer to yourself as the DMB. So that makes a lot of sense. I guess one side question to that is churn. You know, what are you seeing in terms of customer retention? Maybe it's just too early because, you know, you know, relatively young company. But again, I think positioning yourself as the standard and, you know, companies having like, kind of like, you know, powered by IBM, or Intel inside. But if you could be PatternEx, like a supplier could be PatternEx certified, that's incredibly powerful. So what I like, which is again unusual, usually as an investor, when you're investing in a company, you're sort of disintermediating someone or something, and frankly, you're kind of pissing off, someone in the equation. I think here it's a win-win-win all around, because the suppliers are happy, the vendors are happy, the customers are happy, and so I guess what, if any, pushback or tension are you seeing in the marketplace when you talk to folks? Because to me, it seems like, I don't want to say compelling, but it seems like a pretty straightforward kind of situation where why wouldn't they, frankly, want to, go with your solution? And what are you seeing as a sales cycle typically in this market? Again, obviously it'll evolve because you're still are you in the market for less than a year?
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So, curious to sort of your thoughts on, what, if any, pushback and tension you're seeing in the marketplace. What are you seeing today as the sales cycle? And sort of what is the video, the snapshot in the video? What do you see your sales cycle maybe evolving to down the road?
So I would say, and we see two types of customers today. You have like the enterprises, the banks, that takes their time on sales cycle, and every entrepreneur in the room should take into consideration when going into banks. It's a long sales cycle. But we have, because of the things that we do is more broader. We support any industry. So, we have tech companies that engage with us and in less than a month, onboarded, bought the product and start work. It's a SaaS product driven from the cloud. So all they need to do is get a username and a password and start adding vendors. So for them, it's very easy just to brought in. And I think we saw many cases where in less than a month, they start working with us, and that's...
Are you guys eating your own dog food? Are you using your own product?
Of course.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah.
So you brought up an interesting word there, Bruce, it's churn. Part of the problem here is that you have survey fatigue on both sides, both between the people who are sending and the people who are receiving. So what are your capabilities to do a form of transfer learning, whereas someone can say, you guys can say, well, company X just asked that same question of Bank of America last month. I've got that current response from Bank of America. I don't need to ask Bank of America that question again. So how can you reduce the friction, the survey fatigue here, and transfer that learning?
So basically, everybody joining the PatternEx platform and the PatternEx network are gaining from sharing that information. Because right now, when we have multiple evaluators evaluating the same supplier, when he joins the system and actually collaborates on it, he shares his information. He shows his progress of how he's improving his security posture. And by that, actually, everybody are gaining, because not only the evaluator that started the process with him, the next evaluator that will evaluate him also will gain from that in a matter of questionnaires, in a matter of onboarding the platform and improving their security posture.
So to use the social media phrase, if you will, I mean, what we're talking about here is the network effect.
Exactly.
And maybe that should be part of the slide, should be included there off of that, because I think it's very powerful, because again, the fatigue is just so darn high on both sides these days.
Totally.
And if you can say that you're helping to eliminate that, I think that's very powerful.
Yeah, you're totally right.
Thank you. Now it's our questions, right?
Yeah, I think so. We need to ask the experts.
All right, so as for go-to-market, and you mentioned that a bit, I mean, we're seeing, even though now we're sell to evaluators and to companies that have a lot of vendors, we see requests from both sides, also suppliers. Which direction should we go first?
I don't see why you can't do both at the same time. As long as you're the central clearinghouse, as long as you do the send and receive. I would hope, though, that you have a couple of other functions that, to me, would be relatively easy to put into that is basically, when was it sent? When was it received? Who was it assigned to? Who from the responder side gave you that response? And so some sort of workflow then that would make it easy for both of the companies to act on that. So if Sally, answered that question 6 months ago, maybe it goes back to Sally because you've got a similar question sort of thing. So something, again, to cut down on the fatigue here for that, you know, those capabilities I think would be very helpful.
So maybe I would add to Tim's answer and maybe give two somewhat potentially contradictory answers. Number one, you know, for us as investors, it's all about focus. So the simple answer is, where's the money? You know, who's paying you guys? Where do you monetize that and follow the money? You know, while you were presenting, one of my thoughts was, and maybe Tim's touching on it a little bit, is there an opportunity though, which again may conflict with my comment of focus and focusing on the money as well, but to build maybe a marketplace, just sort of a whole ecosystem where folks are all there and again, worry about monetization later. You know, it's maybe more of a land grab and becoming the standard. And over time, you know, obviously there's a myriad of ways to monetize that.
Well, you mentioned D&B, but maybe a better analogy is Fair Isaac, as far as your credit score is concerned.
Actually, it's funny, just as a side note, when you mentioned D&B and Fair Isaac, I actually think those companies are somewhat obsolete, and it's an opportunity for people in this room to create and innovate, because really, think about it, your FICO score, those ratings, I mean, give me a break. Like, the data today, I mean, we have a number of fintech companies that are leveraging social media, so we know so much about you just based on who you associate with. There's very high correlation to who you're friends with on, you know, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, et cetera. And all the data is much more real time, and especially in emerging markets where they don't even have credit rating and inability to do that. So I think a lot of those folks are going to be shopping to buy companies that are here in this room like yours and others, because credit rating, you know, you mentioned it sort of generically credit rating, but I think credit rating is somewhat dead and obsolete. And again, think about credit rating 2.0, where it's all around, you know, your digital footprint is going to facilitate and enable, you know, your social, you know, credit rating scores.
Careful, careful. The creepiness factors here. You're not going towards the Chinese social
no,
index scale here, are we?
Yep. Okay. If you already mentioned D&B and the financial aspect of it, I mean, do you think our market will look the same? I mean, will you see a market where there is few companies that rate the security posture of companies? Will you see one to rule them all, or will it be like the financial, where you have D&B and Moody's and so on?
Yeah, different practices.
I think there will. I mean, I think it would be unrealistic to expect that, but I think what will be key for you then is the transparency of your ratings and how you did that. The secret sauce here is not necessarily in the algorithms of how you came up with that, because everyone's going to want to ensure that you're being fair. The secret sauce really then is in the network effect and how many people you have and how you're easing that friction on both the sender and receiver of the surveys. And I think what's obsolete here is the survey. I think this has got to go.
100%, 100%. We actually saw a company 20 years ago that was doing something similar for college applications and grad school applications, because everyone was applying to 5 and 10 schools, and they basically automated and created, you know, one, you know, form to kind of, you know, and digested all they ingested all the information and enabled that. So I think this is somewhat similar in terms of the comment of, you know, is there room for one winner? You know, as an investor, I would say typically what we see is, the short answer is no. I definitely think, to Tim's point, I agree. There's going to be, you know, a handful of players. But can anyone in the room probably name the third rating agency behind Standard and, you know, S&P and D&B? Like
Fitch.
Exactly. But you're probably one of the only people in the room that can. So what I would say is typically, you know, the winner gets about 60% market share. Second place may get, you know, 20, 30%, and to the rest, you know, go the, you know, the spoils. You really want to, you know, don't take this the wrong way, but it's all about world domination.
Yep.
As an investor.
Less the Chinese market.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And, Tim and Bruce, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and with that, we're wrapping up Cyberstorm. So I would like to thank you. I would like to thank all our panelists for the great feedback and discussion, and of course the entrepreneurs. And we'll meet again next year, and next year's Cyberstorm with great cybersecurity innovation coming out of Israel. Thank you very much.